Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. In this microfiche time capsule, we are looking at the Ladies' Home Journal from July 1901. And this article is entitled The Case Against the Editor by Edward Bok. This caught my eye at first because I wasn't sure what they were talking about. Yeah? I don't know if you immediately knew what they were talking about, but apparently they are talking about how a lot of people complain about editors of magazines and saying that they never read the manuscripts, etc., and like all of the smack talk they do. And so this is apparently a perspective from either an editor or someone who knows editors well enough to know the truth about editors. So I thought this might be interesting just because there seem to be several anecdotes that I think several of them are funny. So we will get into what people have to say about editors. So let's get started. There is a popular impression, a very general one in fact, that the editor of a magazine never reads the manuscripts which are sent to him by unknown writers, that all such manuscripts are returned unread or are thrown into capacious waste baskets. A great many writers believe this because they want to believe it, and really anything becomes plausible if one only believes it hard enough and long enough. It would never do for those who write and whose writings are not found acceptable to believe anything else. Yeah, for the brain children of a writer are as precious to him as are the blood children of a mother to her. Each is perfect in the eyes of its parent. Therefore, the editor cannot have had any acquaintance with these brain children. If he had, they would have been immediately adopted into the magazine family. So you see, the case is perfectly clear and easily proven against the editor. Here and there it is conceded that the editor does occasionally read a manuscript, but that is only when some famous name is attached to it. And some persons go so far as to say that the editor does not read even these manuscripts. They prove their ground again by saying that if the editor had read the manuscripts by these famous folk, he never would have printed them. So there the editor is again trapped. The simple and natural deduction is, therefore, that he reads no manuscripts at all. Okay, so it sounds like people think this because it hurts their ego, yeah, to think that the editor did read their manuscript, but then didn't find it good enough and rejected it. And so it's more of this like fear of rejection. Yeah, and this idea that, well, everything I write must be great, so, they must not have read it. Yeah, like that's very convenient, and that's a kind of a narcissistic thing to do, So, anyway. Of course, the editor tries to defend himself when the case is argued and so clearly proven against him. He has a hazy sort of a notion that he is paid for doing precisely the thing which the writers say that he does not do. He has an idea that he reads manuscripts all the time, that nothing goes into his magazine unless it has been carefully read by him, often twice and sometimes thrice. He's a bit mystified when he looks at his payroll and sees on it the names from 3 to 6 people who do nothing day in and day out but read the hundreds of manuscripts that are sent in. Naturally, he wonders what these folks on his staff do if the manuscripts are not read. Why does he employ them? Why does the publisher of the magazine pay their salaries month after month? What is the use of maintaining a manuscript department? You're like, really? Because I have a whole bunch of people who that's all they do. Yeah. So, yeah, they get read. Yeah. I know an editor who, some years ago, reasoned along these lines. People say we do not read their manuscripts. Then why maintain this manuscript reading staff? We might as well save the money which it costs us to do the very thing which these people say we do not do. And forthwith he closed the department and returned unread all manuscripts, save those which came from famous authors. He did exactly what the writers said he had done all along, and strange to relate, his periodical succeeded. He ordered everything he wanted, just as the writers said he had done all along, and he continued doing it until he retired from his position only a short time ago. He was cordially disliked by every ambitious young writer, yet he only did what he had for years been accused of doing, and never had done until he did it deliberately. Folks are so strange. What's interesting to me is that after doing what people said he did, that he was still just as successful. Like it's almost worth it to do it, because the young writers seem to not be very good, yeah? You have to get somebody to believe in your work. Or improve your work well enough that people will pay attention. Yeah, I understand it's hard to get into the industry. Now, it is interesting to speculate for a moment on what would happen if all editors followed this editor's example. For as I happen to be an editor, yeah, that's what I thought. I thought the author was probably an editor himself. Of course, I must be allowed to harbor the delusion that editors do read manuscripts. Suppose the editors of all the magazines had, say, 10 years ago or so, stopped reading the manuscripts of writers of whom they had never heard. What would have happened? For one thing, about a third of the writers who are popular today and whose works almost everybody reads would be unheard of. For, strange as it may seem to the unknown writer of today, there was a time when Mr. Kipling, for example, sent his first manuscript to an editor, and naturally, as he had never published anything, his name must have been unknown. It could not have been a friendship that induced the editor to read his manuscript, because it so happened that the editor who read Mr. Kipling's first work had never heard of Mr. Kipling. So the editor must have been caught off guard at that time, for he actually had read a manuscript to which was attached a name he had never heard nor seen. That was an exceptional case, says the unknown writer. Well, suppose we grant that Mr. Kipling's case was an exceptional one, for the sake of argument, then how about the several hundred other writers, all of whose names were unknown when they were sent their first manuscripts to some editor? Because as a chance would have it, nearly everything in the way of successful essay, poem, story, or novel published during the past 10 or 20 years was first printed in one of the several American magazines. Now, how could this all be if the editors did not read the manuscripts? You see how strange it is, how inexplicable the puzzle becomes, and that too in the face of the clear and convincing manner in which the unknown author has proved his case against the editor. It certainly is strange. So this person is basically refuting this, popular opinion, I guess. Another thing is strange. Some time ago, I had the curiosity to look over the contents for an entire year of 5 of the popular magazines. From my knowledge of the names of famous writers, I recognized less than 1/2 of the names in the contents of the 60 issues of the magazines. I inquired of the editors and asked them the reason of this, and I found that all of the writers whose work they had published during the previous year, 34% were authors who never had before had written for the magazines. Now the puzzle is, how did these unknown authors ever get their writings into these magazines? It couldn't have been on the merit of their wares, because how could the editors find out whether their wares had merit or not? They never read the manuscripts, you know. Strange, isn't it? In fact, the deeper one goes into this whole matter, the stranger it gets. That is, when one considers that editors never read manuscripts. It grows even stranger still when one happens to find out, as I did recently, that it costs 5 magazines over $35,000 every year to maintain their manuscript departments. Of course, since magazine publishers make such vast sums of money, I presume they have to spend it in some manner, and why not on manuscript departments where manuscripts are never read? He's really going after this argument. He's like, people, you're stupid, yeah? Like, why would they pay all these people to do this if nobody did it, yeah? Not long ago, the manuscript reader of a magazine handed to his editor a letter from an irate lady who said, in effect, that she had sent a manuscript on a certain Wednesday morning and had received it back on Friday morning, clearly proving, as she said, that you never read a line of it. Of course, it was a clear case against the editor. The manuscript was a poem 30 lines in length, and the idea of having read it in a day's work was clearly preposterous. Yeah, that wouldn't take that long to read. However, wrote the lady, I enclose another, and we will see. It was another poem 24 lines long. The editor put it aside, kept it a month, and then received a most irate letter demanding to know what had become of the poem. Now you see how difficult it is to please some people. The poor editor had been simply trying not to have another case of neglect proven against him. Sounds like they work pretty fast, yeah? Like if you sent it off on a Monday, it got there on Tuesday, yeah? Oh, it was Wednesday, she said. She sent it off on a Wednesday morning, got there, let's say Thursday morning, got read immediately, and was sent back and got back to her on Friday. Like, that's pretty impressive. Yeah. They just weren't interested in her poem. I mean, it wouldn't take long to read. But at the same time, it's, like claiming that they never read it and that was the proof. Like, dude, we just read it the day it came. Yeah. It was pretty short. Another manuscript reader found page 19 of a certain manuscript placed next to page 71. He naturally did not want to disturb any chronological arrangement of this sort, so after he went all through the manuscript, he placed page 19 where he had originally found it. In a few days came a letter clearly proving that the manuscript had never been read. What the guileless editor had believed to be a peculiarity of folio arrangement was a deliberately planned trick. Of course it was a clear case against the editor. The writer believed it was his duty to expose the editor, and he did it in half a column article in the newspapers. Poor editor. Which another editor had to read, yeah? Like... One beautiful spring morning, an editor found a golden hair lying between the pages of a manuscript. The moment he reached the page, it gracefully fluttered out. Flushed with excitement, the editor caught it. It was not his hair, he argued, therefore it was not his property. Then again, he thought the owner probably lost it and might need it, so he put it back. He was a methodical man, and he replaced it exactly as he had found it. He was not many days older when he received a letter proving by the very hair he had so dexterously caught and conscientiously replaced that he never had read nor even opened the manuscript of the writer. Could anything have been a clearer case against the editor? Most certainly not. It was conclusive and final, don't you see? This is a very sarcastic article. Yeah? But, like you're putting things in to, like, trick the editor to prove that they had never read your manuscript. That's kind of shady, you know? Like, dude, just stop that. If I may drift for a moment into personal reminiscence, I will recall a case where a considerate lady who had ascertained in some occult manner that I had a great deal of leisure on my hands sent me a manuscript and said that, as a test of a personal reading, she had left out every a, and the, and it was for me to supply the words wherever missing as proof that I had read the manuscript. It was a brief article of some 11,000 words. It so happened, unfortunately, that at that particular time I was very busy. It was true that my occupation was not important. It was simply that I was preparing a number of the magazine for my reader. I presume I could have put the work off for a week, but I didn't, and the manuscript went back without the missing words supplied. I see now that it was a mistake, for that particular lady has had me in the pillory in the public prints a number of times, and has clearly proven the case of an unread manuscript against me. She has thus far withheld the fact of the missing words, but of course that is an unimportant detail in proving her case. That's horrible. Like, you're just making them work hard. Like, be like, you have to prove that you've read it. Seriously? No, I don't. Like, ugh, that's awful. And just because you didn't correct her manuscript before you sent it back, like, no, you just read it and was like, this is nonsense and it's ridiculous and I'm not going to read anymore. You know, there's no way you're going to publish it without every N, A, and the. Like, people are just dumb. I remember another case of a very sweet young lady who inserted some of her most beautiful ribbons between the pages of a manuscript. It so happens that I have no particular taste for ribbons, and as the members of my family do not care for the combined colors of a bright orange and a rose scarlet, I had no use for the ribbons, so I put them back in the manuscript. Naturally, it was another case against me, and I was caught red-handed, as it were. Okay, in that case, like, different than the hair. Like, people used to put hairs over, like, books and stuff to make sure nobody read it, particularly journals. But, like, so I kind of understand the hair thing. But the ribbon, like, honestly, if I were to find a ribbon in between pages of a manuscript, I would put it back. Like, I'm sorry, I would just assume that it was a mistake and that people wanted it back. Like, using that as proof that you didn't open it, like, that's dumb. A woman whose erudite scholarship, I most humbly concede, sent me a manuscript on the history of the water supply in the city of Rome in the time of Caesar. Which is not trivial, by the way. That is the aqueducts of Rome, yeah? They're pretty famous. For some reason or other, the subject did not appeal to me. Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to, yeah? Like, everybody has their own taste. Well, to me personally, nor could I believe that it would interest the readers of the Ladies' Home Journal. So editor-like, I did not read the manuscript. In a few days, the author called to argue the matter out. It seemed to me that she was becoming heated, and as the outside temperature had that subtle suggestion of summer balm which it sometimes had in Philadelphia in mid-August, I tried to avoid any personal discomfort for the offer by frankly acknowledging that I had not read the manuscript. Of course, that was an absolute and direct case of trapping the editor. Well, no, like, I don't blame you. If you get a manuscript that is not interesting to you, then absolutely say, I'm sorry, but that's not interesting. That subject is not interesting to us, and so we're not going to read it. Yeah, I think that's fair, you know? Ladies' Home Journal isn't really well known for having historical articles about, like, ancient Rome. Yeah? It's not known for that. It's more about fashion and interesting, like, entertaining things. It's a little more entertaining than that. And it does do some history, but it not, like, in that direction. So history is like people, like talking about individuals. Yeah, that might get published, but not one about, like, aqueducts in Rome. Yeah, no, I agree. That's not really the subject for the Ladies' Home Journal. Like, she should try a different magazine, yeah? There are historical magazines that publish articles like that, just not this one. Yeah. These instances are simply recited to show that there is truth in the cases which are constantly proven against the editor in the matter of his refusal to read manuscripts. They couldn't be otherwise than true, because scores of unknown writers, from such personal experiences as I have cited, have proven their truth beyond the first shadow of a doubt. Of course, some editor might rise up and say that there is another side of the question. He might go so far in his careless arguments as to say that every question has two sides, or make the strange comparison that even doors have two sides. I have known one editor to declare that in this question of whether manuscripts are read or not read, the difference between the author and the editor is that one speaks from what he thinks and the other from what he knows. But that argument would be open to the convincing answer that it is the author who speaks from what he knows and not the editor. And hasn't this fact been proven to be a fact from the instances of absolute proof which I have cited in this article? Again and again, the editor has been weighed in the balance of ribbons, hairs, glued pages, and missing words, and again he has been found wanting. Isn't that proof positive enough? Why allow the editor to have his say after such a clear verdict of guilty? It is a clear case against him, and not even a strange case. He has no case, in fact. He never reads a manuscript. He is opposed to the rise of the unknown author. He wants none but famous writers for his magazines. That is why 5 editors had only 34% of new writers in their periodicals last year. He is adverse to having any fresh minds or new ideas appearing in the pages of his magazines. He wants the same names over and over again. His contributors are all his personal friends, who invite him to dinner and who visit at his home. And, between the courses at dinner, these authors sell to the editors whose guests they are, the stories and articles which are printed in the magazines. The authors choose these times because, being guests, naturally the editors as hosts cannot refuse them. Such authors as Miss Wilkins, Mrs. Humphrey Ward, Mr. Barry, Mr. Howells, Mr. Seton Thompson all sell their wares in this way. It is entirely a matter of personal favor, of friendship between the editor and the author. The question of merit never enters into it because it cannot, since to discover merit the editor would of necessity have to read a manuscript, and that, as the unknown writer has proven so clearly, he never does. Okay, you could dial down the sarcasm, yeah? It's a little over the top at the moment. There is nothing that an editor enjoys so much as to crush the ambitions of young authors as they come to the surface. Suppose he did otherwise. Suppose for a moment that he encouraged new writers. Isn't it plain to see how easy it would be to get a fresh note into his periodical? And naturally, that is just what he doesn't want. The success of the magazines depends chiefly and entirely upon having them all alike as much as possible, in having the same writers and treating the same subjects. Any introduction of new talent would be fatal to the accepted and perfect understanding of this sort which exists between the editors of all magazines. So careful are the editors to prevent any breaks into these ranks that the moment a young writer of promise is discovered trying to get inside the lines, the editor nearest to the point of attack immediately dispatches word to all other editors warning them of impending danger. There exists a perfect freemasonry of this sort among editors. Okay, calm down, yeah? With the knowledge of how it is done, anyone can easily figure out how impossible it is for a young writer to get into one of the modern magazines. This is particularly true of the young author of distinct promise. The more ability he shows in his first manuscript, the tighter are the lines drawn to keep him out. And as all the magazine editors think and act as one man in this particular respect, it is easy to see what a formidable front the young author has to face. It is hard on the young author, I allow, but to give way for an instant would mean calamity to the argument of the unknown writer that a writer without fame cannot secure an audience for his wares in the magazines of today. And the editor must make good the unknown writer's argument. In fact, that is what he is there for, pure and simple. Every publisher of a magazine employs an editor solely to keep merit and unknown writers out of his periodical. That is all that editor does. The magazine editor, in other words, is a man to be envied. He lives a life of perfect ease and luxury. His personal friends write the contents, the compositors set the type, the printers print the magazine, and the publisher publishes it. So what is there left for the editor to do? Nothing but to play golf. All right, so I feel like the last bit I kind of rushed through it because it's a little over the top. Honestly, calm down. We get it. I get it. You could have stopped about 2/3 of the way through and it would have been a great article. Because you kept going and kept going and kept going, it got a little tedious at the end. So, sorry, editor dude. I know that it's annoying to have people constantly saying, oh, you must not have read it, but you know where they're coming from. Their ego is hurt that you rejected their babies, their work, and they're trying to lash out at you in order to make themselves feel better. I know it sucks, but at the same time, you know why they do it. You know why they do it. So, yeah, getting tricked into doing some things and like, people getting upset when you don't read them because it's not appropriate of a topic, like that makes sense to me. That's but at the same time, so if you're a writer and you send a historical article to a magazine, wouldn't you choose a magazine that prints historical articles, you know, and isn't more of an entertainment magazine like the Ladies' Home Journal is? So I'm just saying. Yeah, I think that you make some very good points, but at the same time, you kind of go over the top with hammering those points home, you know. It's like, okay, we get it, it's okay. So, but that's just my opinion. What do you think? Do you think that he went too far, or this author, Edward Bach, or do you think that that he just went far enough? Yeah, and that the topic deserved as much sarcasm as he threw at it. So what's your opinion? I would love to hear it in the comments below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.